Deputy Connolly, and then...
Thank you, Chair. Well, just to start with the last part, using political manoeuvres, I have to say that's outrageous. Throughout all of this process, politics did not come into it. I want to thank you, Chair. I'll be coming back in a minute about the injunction, and I mightn't be so gracious. But at this point, let me thank you for the way you've chaired it, fairly, under extreme difficulty, with serious attacks on a constant basis in the media, and particular leaks, I would say, from none of us present today, actually. And that raises questions in itself, to the point where I said we should have no private meetings anymore. We should have public meetings so we determine the narrative. But to say that there was political manoeuvring is disgusting, really, over a process where politics never came into it until the words "not advisable." And so simply Fine Gael wanted the words "not advisable." We changed our words to make it as soft as possible, to say "not procedurally correct."
Not procedurally
appropriate.
Not procedurally. That's okay. I accept. No, I have no difficulty. I have absolutely no difficulty with that. It's the spin being put on that it was political manoeuvring. I have absolutely no difficulty with Fine Gael having a vote. But the spin that's been put on that is truly shocking. When the focus, if I could now,
no,
I didn't interrupt. There's been non-stop spin from NAMA in the first instance, very publicly, very serious attacks on an office. Those attacks continued here. We bent over backwards, Chair, to bring in I for one had an open mind. I'd say everybody on the committee had. And we bent over backwards to hear the evidence. Now, to talk about political manoeuvrings is really serious, because it is definitely undermining the committee. And as Deputy MacDonald said, it's the one piece of hope for the public out there. The one piece of hope that we come in here and try and ask questions, sometimes ineffectually, sometimes not very well, because it's extremely difficult, notwithstanding the excellent help from the Office of Controller and Auditor General. So I really, let's park this thing about politics, because it's been done with a purpose by Fine Gael. Number two, I have to say I was taken totally by surprise by your comment in the Dáil. In the first instance, you should have told us, or maybe you can clarify why you didn't. If you remember the private session, I was the person who raised the comment in relation to your conversation with the Minister, and I said I was unhappy. I pointed out that if pressure was being put to change our words, what would happen if he spoke to each member of the committee in turn and so on, and I raised that with you at the time in private. So it should have been, each of us are equal. It's a serious threat if that was the threat. It adds to the pressure, the serious pressure that this committee has been placed under. So I leave it at that, Chair, and look forward to your clarification.
Now, when I got that letter, and as every member got that letter, or we all, to circulate it, I read the last sentence of the letter as received by the Minister on that day, and it says, "I'm also sure that any conclusions which do materialise in the Committee's final report will be based on available evidence, due and fair process and logical reason, and will withstand challenge." So the minute I read that, I took that to mean a legal challenge on the day, and it was written, I don't know what challenge he was talking about. So I am saying the letter, as far as I was concerned, actually had that reference in it, and that's the final two words in his letter. So I took it to mean, be on notice, your report might be subject to challenge. And that's what the letter said. So in that context, later on the same day, went into the restaurant, the Minister was there and asked me to have a word with him. He asked me, which I did, happily. I know the Minister for several years, good personal relations with the Minister. And he went over and he said to me, I went over and spoke to him, and he said, and there's no dispute about this, the Minister hasn't disputed anywhere about the meeting. He was probably surprised that I raised it last night, so he hasn't disputed any content. He said, you haven't been fair, you should have given me an opportunity to come in and speak to the committee. And I said, Minister, you're the one who wasn't fair in this situation. You were here for 5 hours. You were the only one in possession of the information. And you can't accuse us of not asking you something that we didn't know about. And the conversation went on that lines about who was being fair and who was being unfair to whom. The conversation concluded with a statement by the Minister. He said, you know I can injunction. And that was essentially the end of the conversation. And in truth, having read the letter from the Minister a few hours earlier, I could see that was the frame of mind that had come from the Minister in writing. So that extra bit was confirmation and an advance. It was a new ground as far as I was concerned, but highly serious. So I did tell the members of the committee. And now, in the interest of, I think it's probably important for the Public Accounts Committee to make this statement. To make this statement, and it's broader than the discussion with the Minister, and I'm going to broaden it further. I actually think the fact that some people tried to put pressure on the committee and we issued our report, it didn't undermine the committee, it has actually strengthened the committee. And I think this will strengthen the committee when we are seen to be fearless, and we will take no rebuke from anybody. And I want to now put further on the record, and at this point in time, my priority as chairman was to get a report agreed. And I felt to over-elaborate further on the conversations, notwithstanding there was a reference to the legal threat in the letter, which every member could have read themselves, I felt it might have upset the possibility further of getting an agreed report. So I was more keen to get a report, and if something comes out after it, so be it. However, I'm now going further. I would take it, I'm only new to this job since last year, I take it as normal that a chairman of a Public Accounts Committee will come under pressure from a variety of sources, and I just take it as par for the course in my job, and it doesn't influence how I act. I now want to go on and talk about two further people who threaten legal issues in relation to this committee and our proceeding. First of all, in my conversation with the chairman and NAMA over a period, he did mention to me that the issue of, well, he did mention to me the issue of legal advice was being considered, but the high financial cost of it to NAMA was an issue that they had to take into account. So that remark was made, but it didn't influence myself or my work here. I'm just putting it on record.
Legal advice in relation to what?
Pardon?
What's the
in relation to our report that we were potentially finding adverse findings against NAMA. I'm taking it a step further. The senior people in this House made it very clear to me as chairman that if they weren't happy with the wording of the report, they would prevent our report being issued, and they would take our report to the Committee and Procedures Committee to have it approved by them and prevent us. No, senior people. Well, I'm not going to name the officials.
I don't mean you to name names necessarily, but are we talking TDs, ministers?
Oh no, I'm talking about senior official.
Officials?
A senior official,
right.
and not the clerk of the committee. Not the clerk of the committee.
So in other words, senior people who
in the Oireachtas
administer the committee process?
Yes. Okay, for the moment, I'm not going to name an official by name. That's very standard practice.
Well, let's use his title. Was it the clerk of the Dáil?
No, let me clarify. I am not identifying the person here today, right? But I'm making it clear that senior officials, and certainly not anybody in this room, made it very clear to me that if the wording wasn't within the satisfaction of what the House felt, they felt was safe, they had understanding orders, the authority, and I haven't checked the standing orders, to take our draft report to the CPP, and they would decide whether or not it could be issued. So I'm now making it very clear, as chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, before this report was issued, the question of legal challenge was raised by the Minister of Finance with me. NAMA raised it with me that they were considered, and the senior officials in this House said they would consider their approach in terms of not allowing senior officials. Now, I took all that as par for the course as chairman, as my job to deal with that and move on. I'm now putting it on the record is that I think the fact that we did our work has strengthened the committee, despite people's efforts to undermine us. I think we're a stronger committee, and I'm just putting that on. And I will say further, I just want to say about NAMA. NAMA made it very clear. I'm on this committee a couple of terms now, and in previous occasions, and maybe on this term, I have often been critical of the CNAG's reports before the committee. Why were issues coming to light now that you didn't highlight earlier? And I was told that NAMA had the dossier prepared of all my previous comments of the CNAG over several periods of years. And given that if we were backing up the CNAG, that would be used to show that I, on previous occasions, had no problem criticising the CNAG, and but on this occasion, I wasn't necessarily going down that road. So I was made aware that was there. I have no problem. I'm proud of everything I've said at a previous PAC meeting. I'm just saying, as chairman, I've come under pressure from three sources, none of which influenced me one way or the other in terms of completing our work. I actually think we are stronger for having withstood that pressure, despite people's efforts to limit what we might actually say. And I'm just saying the conversation with the Minister is fair up. And finally, in relation to what Deputy McSharry said, I personally hold no personal angst against the Minister of Finance. We're here a long time. We have good, friendly, cordial relations. He came over to me last night during the course of the vote on the floor of the House to shake my hands to know, can we make up and can we move on? And that happened on the floor of the Chamber last night. And as good on personal relations, we shook each other's hand and we said, fine, let's move on. So there's no personal angst, but there was a professional, serious disagreement between us. And finally, I do have to conclude. I know people are going to say they'll be surprised by what I'm saying further. The one thing I do want to say is that in our report, we have 2 paragraphs out of the 101 pages in relation to our comments in relation to the Minister. In our report, there are 3 full pages from the Minister on his view of what we had to say about him. So in fact, in terms of fairness, he has got far more space in our report in relation to his views and all. So for anyone to suggest he hadn't an opportunity, there's 3 pages of a letter from the Minister in relation to his view of the matter in our report, and I think that is more than fair play. So Deputy Cullinan is first to speak, and Deputy Cullinan, or Madigan is second, Connolly is third.
I accept.
Who is next? Catherine. Sorry, my mistake.
Thanks, Chair.
Keep track of.
But first of all, Chair, I think first of all I'd like to thank you for withstanding the pressure. Certainly, we felt pressure on this with the continuous leaks and the continuous. And I'd say the person that leaked did it deliberately and shamefully. And if they're in this room, I hope they look within themselves. And again, I'll repeat that we should have no more private meetings. We should take the power back to this committee. Number 2, we have 3 universities and third-level institutions just waiting for us. We have come in diligently, and particularly yourself, Chair, and I realise as Chair of an Irish committee it is not easy and you have extra pressure on you with constant correspondence from people. Even in relation to the universities, we've been flooded with emails about very serious issues for people calling themselves whistleblowers and so on. And we're the last hope for those people, and it's extremely difficult. So now we're here today, we're back at 2:30, we were here yesterday. It's important that that's said. Now, you've gone through a number of things. The Minister had every chance last night to say that you weren't telling the truth or that you were wrong, and he did not do so. In fact, he left the chamber. The debate last night was rearranged twice, I understand, to facilitate the Minister being present for the debate. And when it came up last night, he came in and he left very shortly. He had a chance to come back in afterwards and say that you were wrong with what you said, and he didn't. So therein is an answer in itself. To think that you were told that NAMA had a dossier on you is truly shocking. It is truly shocking, referring to all your previous criticisms. The fact that NAMA in itself was speaking to you is shocking, because you're simply chair of this committee and we're all equal. And if NAMA had anything to say, or any senior official, or the Minister, they should have written to us. And you should have then highlighted that correspondence, as you always do. And that hasn't been done. So I would say what's happening really with this committee, if we focus on the politics, it's ignoring actually the most serious threat to democracy. There's an absolute serious threat. In my opinion, and from day one I've said the Controller and Auditor General's report was a mild report. A rational, reasonable, mild report that highlighted concerns about a sales process. And NAMA went into full attack mode rather than saying, what's in this? I believe that there wasn't even read in total, and they picked out a 10% or a 5% and zoned in on that with tunnel vision, as opposed to what the report was about, which was about accountability and holding the system to account. And in fact, if they had come in and said, oh yes, we agree, retrospectively, we should have followed up the conflict of interest, but we were under enormous pressure, they did nothing like that. They went on an attack with a small piece. The Minister has done the exact same, 32 conclusions, and he comes into the door last night and tells us we were conjuring up evidence. Listen to that for a phrase. Conjuring up criticism, to be precise. Not once did he say that, but twice. So this committee is now conjuring up criticism. Now, I've said publicly, I won't repeat it here, I'll repeat it publicly because I'll stick to the facts here. For you, I'm delighted you've met up with the Minister because it's important to have cordial relations. However, boys shaking hands, or as I used to refer to them on the City Council, the boys in the short pantses, men shaking hands is not good enough. It's very good for you to do that, and I'm delighted for you. But boys shaking hands does nothing for me and does nothing for openness and accountability. So what we need here, really, these are serious issues. I won't dwell on them anymore. We need to deal with this. This is a serious threat to the committee, a serious threat to the democratic process.